If you're good, I hope you managed to get some rest over the weekend. Before we get into today's lesson, can you please make sure that you have your pencil case and your exercise book or whatever else you have been completing your English work on. Pause the video now and make sure that you are sorted. Okay, if you're back, that means that you are ready to write down our title, date and LO. Question 1, it's the 11th today, and our LO is I will learn about question 1 for language paper 1 so I can read a model answer and write my own. Pause the video now, get title, date and LO down. Okay, if you're back, that means you're ready to complete the do now. You're going to copy the sentences and you're going to add the correct punctuation. There is only one punctuation mark for each sentence. So pause the video now, copy the sentences and add the correct punctuation. Okay, if you're back, that means that you are ready to correct. So get your purple pen ready to tick and cross your answers and make sure you're writing the correct answer if you got it wrong. This is something that I'm going to be looking for when you're submitting your work, making sure that you're making your purple pen corrections. So here are the correct answers. I'll just talk you through them. Comma is used here to separate items in a list. A comma is used here to separate the main part of the sentence to the subordinate clause. Comma is used here to separate the date. Comma is used here to separate Cooper. You could also use a colon here if you would like. And then a comma is used here to separate the discourse marker from the rest of the sentence. This is the mistake that we often make. Pause the video now and finish these corrections. Okay, so last week I introduced the language paper 1 very briefly to you, and we learned that there are 5 different questions. So over the coming weeks, we're going to take each question in turn. Before we can do any of the questions or practice any of the questions, I want to give you an overview of the expectations of question 1 in the language paper 1. So question 1 will always ask you to identify information in a text. Okay, that's the assessment objective number 1, AO1. And that is what you're marked for. You can get 4 marks for this question. So as a result, you should spend 5 minutes answering question 1. Before attempting question 1 or any of the other questions, obviously you would have spent time reading the extract and maybe making any annotations or notes. So at this point, when you're in question 1, you might be 15 to 20 minutes into the essay already. Question 1 will always look something like this. It will say, read again the first part of the source from lines blank to blank. List 4 things from this part of the text that you learn about. Okay, so how to approach question 1. Here are a few of my top tips. I would actually like you to write these down so you can refer back to them. So can you pause the video and write this title? Okay, so you should have a title written down, and we're going to go through these bullet points. Make sure you're also copying these down. So for question 1, you always just want to write 4 short sentences about what you have learnt from that part of the source, and these can be direct quotes from the source. I'd also recommend that you start each of your sentences with it, he, she, or they, depending on what the question is asking you to write about. Obviously, if it's like a car or a house, you might want to start with it. If it's a person, he, she, or a group of people, you might want to write they. You must only focus on the keywords in the question. If the question asks you to list 4 things about the female character and you list 4 things about the male character, you will get 0 marks. So please make sure you're focusing on the question. I'd also recommend writing 1 idea per line, just how these are set out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Bullet pointing your answers in this way makes it very clear to the examiner what the 4 things are. And I'd also recommend drawing a box around the specified lines. Obviously, this is hard at the moment because you don't have a paper copy, but when you do have the paper copy in an assessment situation, draw a box around the lines. Okay, pause the video now and get these 5 key tips into your exercise book. Okay, so you should have written these 5 tips down. And now we're going to move on to kind of the main part of approaching question 1. So every time we look at a new question type, it's going to follow the same structure. I'm going to show you a model for White Fang, and then you're going to replicate that process for propping up the line. So at this point, can you make sure you're going on to show my homework? Please make sure that you have White Fang open and make sure that you have propping up the line open and ready. Pause the video and make sure you have both those documents open for me now, please. Okay, so let's look at this question 1 for White Fang. It says, read again the first part of the source from lines 1 to 6. List 4 things from this part of the text that you learnt about what White Fang does. So before doing anything, I would always recommend highlighting a key part, the key parts, of the question. So, what lines is it asking you to look for? This example is asking me to look at lines 1 to 6. And what is it asking me to write about? It's asking me to write about what White Fang does. This just means when I'm looking at the extract, I can be really, really focused on my question. So like I say, normally we're going to write down a box around the extract. As we can't do that online, I have just copied the extract here. So I'm going to read this now. As I'm reading, I want you to just have a think about some of the things that White Fang does. One night, while all the house slept, White Fang awoke and lay very quietly. Very quietly he smelled the air and read the message it bore of a strange god's presence, and to his ears came sounds of the strange god's movements. White Fang burst into no furious outcry. It was not his way. The strange god walked softly, but more softly walked White Fang, for he had no clothes to rub against the flesh of his body. He followed silently. In the wild he had hunted live meat that was infinitely timid, and he knew the advantage of surprise. So after reading the extract, I would always recommend quickly going through and just highlighting some of the key things that I have learnt about what White Fang does. So, White Fang awoke, he lay very quietly, he smelled the air, he read the message, he walked softly, he followed silently. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things I've highlighted, and obviously I just need to choose 4. Okay, so at this point you're ready to write your answer. This is my answer to question 1. As you can see, I've written 4 things on 4 separate lines. All of them start with he, and they are very short sentences. He awoke, he lay quietly, he heard strange sounds, he walked softly. here are some other things that I could have written. He smelled the air, he followed the intruder, he read the message that bore of a strange God's presence. It's important to notice here that this example has used a quote and the rest of them have not. Each of these, whether they have used a quote or you've talked about it in your own words, would still get a mark. But you only need 4 things. So this would get 4 out of 4. Okay, so now you've seen what question 1 is, how to approach it. You are now going to do one on your own. So can you please pause the video and write this question at the top down into your exercise book. It says, read again the first part of the source from lines 1 to 6. List 4 things from this part of the text that you learnt about Alfred. Write that down for me now. Okay, if you're back, that means that this is in your exercise book, and I want you to mimic the same process that I just used to answer a question 1 for White Fang. So the first thing I want you to do is highlight what lines this question wants you to focus on and who or what you are writing about. Pause the video and do that now for me. Okay, so you should have highlighted lines 1 to 6, and you should have also highlighted Alfred. That's what you're going to be writing about. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you to answer this question 1 based on propping up the line. We've already identified the lines, and I've said here draw a box around them. I'm aware that you can't do that without a paper copy. So what I would do is on the Word version of propping up the line, I would just highlight lines 1 to 6. After you've done that, I would also reread the lines to make sure that you're focusing this time round on Alfred and what you learn about him. And then you're going to answer the question in the way that I have modelled. If you need to rewind the video and go back to the model example, you can do so. And don't forget that you have the top tips written in your exercise book to refer to. Okay, pause the video and complete this question 1 now. Okay, if you're back, that means that you have completed your question 1 and that you are ready to mark. So grab your purple pen and be ready to tick or cross your answers. Please make sure that you write the correct answer if you got it wrong. So here are some of the things that the examiners would award marks for. He felt something move, he was cold, he was sitting in the mud in the dark, he was slumped against the wall, he was wearing a battle dress jacket, he had pale, dirty skin, he could feel something pushing to get past him, he stood up fast, he felt revulsion. If you got any mixture of these 4, give yourself 4 out of 4. If any of you have written quotes and you're not sure whether those quotes would have got you a mark, just mention that when you submit your work and I can double check that for you and clarify your marks. I'm hoping that all of you got 4 out of 4 for this, but to double check, can you please take a photograph of your lesson today and send it to my email. My email is always listed on Show My Homework. All right, guys, excellent work today. I look forward to seeing your 4 out of 4 question 1s, and I will speak to you in tomorrow's lesson. Take care.